Abigail Hathaway. I lead or co-lead theme 2 in the FUVN network, so I'll be chairing the session. And in the session, we've got a few talks on the mini projects that have been funded as part of the network, and followed at the end by a keynote from Miranda. So first off, I'd like to introduce Marco Phillip King, who's going to talk about not every air quality measurement should be treated the same. Visuals.
Thanks, Abigail. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all. But if you want me to stand anywhere for the video or anything, am I good?
Somewhere up there. Fine.
And everyone online, you can hear me good? Okay, cool. So when I was putting this talk together, I was just thinking to myself, what was the motivation for asking for a little bit of money to think about the question, why shouldn't we talk about and air quality visuals being exactly the same way? And I think probably the motivation was partly down to Kath, who said that when you become a lecturer, what eventually happens to you is that you stop coding and you get away further and further away from code. And I thought to myself, well, actually, I want to stay close to code, so I'm going to do a little bit of programming. And then the second motivation. Give it time. No. Yeah, when does that kick in? Yeah, the second, well, I think actually 3 motivations. The second motivation, Henry would probably attest to it, that I'm a bit of a graph nut, and I give all sorts of hassling meetings with talking about different types of graphs and why we should use this type. And he goes, no, just keep it simple, don't make it complicated. The third motivation was actually probably from trying to build teaching spaces within the University of Leeds. And one of the issues that we often have is that we know how many people we can fit in a room. We probably know about what type of visualization technology we have, but we probably don't know. And this is probably one of the most important things to all of us, is what the air quality is like in that room. Is there any way of standardizing sort of a traffic light system that tells us this room is going to be green, yellow, or red? So teamed up with James McGrath from, I was going to say National University of Ireland, but they've actually just had a rebrand, and they're now University of Galway, and Thomas Cooper from Sustainability here at Leeds, and he is or was in charge of a program called the Living Lab that basically allowed us to put air quality sensors in different locations with students and collectively collect all of that data and have a look at it. And he was also interested in trying to do the same sort of traffic light system for student accommodation, right? So that was the sort of the background to why are we interested in these types of visualization of air quality. So there are 3 objectives that I asked for this money for. Essentially, I think it boils down to the single objective that I want to make an app. I want to make a toolkit or a dashboard. I can plot some graphs and visualize this stuff. But the reality is that there are actually quite a few tools out there, especially for outdoor air quality, visualizing outdoor air quality and understanding, summarizing metrics, and they're really, really good. But there are so many different platforms for indoor air quality that you can buy off the shelf, or that you go to a different manufacturer and say, oh, well, our sensor works with this. But there's not so much in the way of, in fact, there isn't, unless you write it yourself, a platform that you can just take from GitHub, download it yourself, put your own data in, and visualize that data. And I know there's a great project, the SAMI project, which has, I mean, gigabytes and almost terabytes of data, right, Henry? Or will have potentially terabytes of data from schools. And I thought, well, can I produce a bit of a platform for all of you and anybody else publicly to actually download and put your own data in and have a go at looking at what the different types of metrics look like. So the first thing was to do that. The second thing was to put it on GitHub. I haven't done that yet, but document it. And the third thing, although that probably ought to have come first in some senses, was to convene a workshop where we could co-create some metrics and think about the visualization of different types of air quality measurement. Because, I mean, today we've talked all about the effect of different types of diseases on lungs, and one of the things that was really interesting for me was to take a data set that existed from Ireland, and in Ireland they have a big problem with radon, not so much in England, although in certain locations they do too, and use this essentially to back up this. Now, how has anybody come across this type of setup where you've got the, well, first off, what is there, right? I wish it was actually. Spot on, yeah. just checking if you're still awake after lunch. Yeah, exactly, and that's probably something. My house doesn't look like that, but but to a certain extent, that's what happens. You put the sensor in the hallway, or the builder, whatever, puts the sensor in the hallway, and is recording temperature, or it could even be recording CO2 or whatever you're interested in. But it's measuring something that's not in the living zone per se, right? And there was a really nice example of, I can't remember his name, but he was working for an environmental consultancy firm, and they installed, or they subcontracted someone to install a black bulb temperature sensor, fabulous, and somebody had put it inside the boiler cupboard. He's not actually here today, because I would have loved, I'm pretty sure some of you will remember who I'm talking about, and he said that he could not believe that that's what had happened. So it was registering, it was so hot in here, and therefore this temperature sensor is effectively showing you something that's going higher and higher and higher, whereas the outside of that cupboard was going lower and lower and lower. And if you took the average of that, you might find that the overall environment was quite nice. You know, you might find a positive correlation between the two things. But actually, sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes when you aggregate data, let's say you had sensors in multiple rooms, you aggregate all of that data up together, you might find that the trend has a negative or a positive correlation altogether. But if you disaggregate it, the trend gets flipped on its head. And that's called Simpson's paradox. And to a certain extent, that's kind of what's happening in that Costa boiler room, where everything looks like it's going really sky high, but everywhere else is being cold. Right, so aggregate that thing together, that's not a reality of what's happening in your environment. In fact, the opposite is happening, so you should disaggregate. And the same at home, right? So why should we rely on just a thermostat or a CO2 monitor in the hallway? Probably shouldn't, should we? Think about putting multiple, and specifically, where do we put them? Anyway, so the data set that I was really interested in using, just because it's quite large, and I'll get onto that in a second, is about radon in Ireland, and we had just earlier on a really nice talk about the effect on lungs, and radon is a carcinogen for anybody who wasn't so aware of it, and it's a big problem in Ireland. So if you measure radon in your house and it's above about 200 becquerel per meter cubed, and you have that sustained reading over about 3 months, then you should do something about your home. But the problem is, how do they measure it? They don't generally have a sensor that sits in your house. What do? They go in the Environmental Protection Agency and they measure once, spot check once, twice, 3 months. Oh, need to do something? No, don't need to do something. That's not very good. So James actually had 100 houses installed with air quality monitors measuring CO2, temperature, humidity, variety of VOCs. I don't know which VOCs, that's probably by the by, but the radon was of interest to me. And he did that specifically because he thought, well, modern retrofitted houses or modern houses are particularly good in terms of energy efficiency, but is that having an effect on your radon levels? So after putting in 100 houses, you inevitably have 100 time series for every single room in that house. And what are you going to do with that data? You know, so you've got your bathroom, your bedroom, your living room, your kitchen. If you were going to aggregate it all together, you might find that it's a fabulous house. You disaggregate it, we need to do something. Right? And the same thing for CO2, and I actually quite like these graphs because I sit sometimes looking at them. Well, I like the colors, but that's another story. I sit sometimes looking and thinking to myself, can I figure out what's happening in these people's houses? You know, can you extract from what's happening here what could be happening? For example, like here they've probably turned off the device because it's unlikely to go up to 6,000, or somebody's blown on it and they turned it off and it goes up to 6,000 parts per million of CO2, which is kind of crazy. But if you take an average between that period, you say that your house is really badly ventilated, etc. And then I think also what might have happened here is that this was an elderly person, and over the Christmas period, looking at their bedroom, they might have stopped sleeping in their bed and gone and slept in their living room. I don't know, it might be. I should ask James, actually, he probably knows because he surveyed the houses and so would know what's happening and has an activity file for each one of these different rooms and what people were doing. Anyway, that's the disaggregated stuff. Now the problem is here, so I've got a problem. How long is it? 15 minutes or 20 minutes?
About 15, including questions.
Ah, okay.
You need to do that.
Right, okay. So one of the big problems for us is that we need to deal with big data. If you have 10 gigs of data that you want to run in memory, you're not going to be able to do it because your laptop's probably going to run out of memory, 16 gigs, and that's it. But most of your data sets are probably in excess of 20, 30 gigs. And there are lots of things that you can do outside of memory. You know, it's easy to deal with that. But if you want an interactive app, you need to start to get away with this problem called swap files, which is where you start to write to the hard drive while doing stuff. So what we wanted was a lightning fast database. There are a variety of different choices, one of which I recommend is Duck database. And if you do a benchmark between your Duck database and others that are specifically good for time series analysis, like MongoDB, it comes out on top by that at a factor of 5. So that's one way of going down the route of databases. Now, that's what we probably would recommend. Now, leading up to the actual workshop is what we want to know is which type of graph should we present? To whom should we present these graphs? What do we want to show? So there are lots of questions. We might just churn out graphs, but we don't necessarily have in mind the end user being, is that a school? Is that the states? Is that an academic? Is etc. How do we want to present these types of graphs? All of these graphs essentially are saying the same thing, right? But sometimes it's harder and easier to read off different ones. So with that in mind, I set up this interactive tool, which is essentially a skeleton platform, which you can download or will be able to download from GitHub to test your own data. And what you can do with it essentially is query a particular house, for argument's sake, choose a particular variable to plot. And then from that, you can then look at potentially correlations between radon levels and CO2, or whatever variable you're particularly interested in, temperature, humidity, VOCs, etc. You can then look at, if you to hover over these individual data points, you'd be able to even potentially look at what's happening. For example, what's the reported occupancy level and other things like lighting level, if you've got that data, pressure, etc. And you have a variety of different options of plotting. So you've got violin plots, you've got histograms, you've got summary statistics, and you've got thresholds. Above this amount, it's for X percentage of time radon, etc. And you can use those to inform in terms of making a change to retrofitting your home or doing something like that. So what I wanted to finally finish off with is this workshop idea that hopefully will come off relatively soon. It was planned to be online. With COVID, it's going to change slightly, but anyway, the idea is twofold: is to get together a set of all of you, have some invited speakers that are specializing in risk communication and visualization, talks specifically about their experiences in how to communicate to different types of audiences, look at data analysis experts too, to be able to for us to co-create together in the workshop format types of graphs and types of metrics that could be almost not standardized, because that's probably very difficult to do, but at least preferred, right? So we can start to think about how do we prefer to see things. And then hopefully towards the end of that session, you'll also have had time to download the app and use it with some toy data. I'm very conscious of the time still here, and have a go with it yourself. So with that, I'm looking very much forward to everybody's questions, or if I've got my laptop with you, you want to have a play, you can have a play as well.
If we've got one quick question from the audience, and we should probably move on. We'll start with your going to be around, aren't you, Marco? So we can
I'm here.
in the break and come along to your workshop. Come back there.
Hi, I'm Terry Wilkins from Leeds University. I started my career 50 years ago in the nuclear medicine industry. I was put in a lab, a sort of prefab lab, and it turned out that the lab sat on a radon dump. This particular company has been putting radon into dials for fighter aircraft and polar aircraft. We didn't know that the ground the lab was put on had radon, but the detected radon which had an our solution to the problem was to put a skin around the whole building and pump all the air out before it got into the roof. What kind of solutions are example to remediate that problem people's houses?
Just before you start, people online can't hear, so just to summarise, it was talking about what are the solutions to, asking what the solutions are to radon within people's homes.
I think to be fair to that question, I took the data set to use it as a test data set rather than to understand specifically what to do with the radon. So if I could defer that question to experts with radon, or even James if he's online, if he's able to answer.
So having a home with radon levels that are too high, I've discovered recently. I would say the what was PHE is a very good radon website which guides you through what to do with different levels, and sealing the floor off is kind of a new build approach, but there are, depending on your levels, there's other approaches to ventilate out, whether passively or with active ventilation. But the website I found very user-friendly, so I'll have to do that.
Thanks. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. We better move on. So if we're going to invite up the next speaker, so Monica Mateo Garcia. She was not. Yeah, that's the one. So 12 minutes, time for questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. The presentation I'm bringing you here is about a research project, pilot study that we thought it was very interesting to do as part of a bigger project that we are undertaking about monitoring low carbon homes. And we thought, well, we have the opportunity to take part in a development and the future home standard that I'll explain later on one of my slides for the ones that are not familiar with that. And we thought it could be a very nice opportunity to monitor the indoor conditions of these new homes against the indoor conditions of existing homes. And building on that idea, then we applied for this pilot study, and luckily it was successful. So it's about the impact of different building standards on indoor air quality in homes. And the aim is to, as I mentioned, to monitor the indoor air quality of houses built under current building regulations with homes built under future home standards, to compare the benefits and something that we are very interested in, unintended consequences as well, unintended risks. So it's about monitoring, understanding the differences, and try to identify implications for new building regulations. So future home standard, for the ones that are not familiar about it, is they are going to be the new building regulations from 2025. So at the moment, we are with Building Regs 2013. There's been an uplift approved recently by the Department for Leveling Up, which was the previous Ministry of Housing and Communities. And underneath this new building regulation, the average home will produce between 75 to 80% lower CO2 emissions. So that's quite an uplift compared to current building regulations. So there was a consultation by the governments. That consultation closed. Now they're preparing a new draft. And that's when we thought, well, we can do something about this and see if we can demonstrate how to achieve building regulations and then to monitor the houses. And the idea is that to achieve this, we would use low carbon forms of heating and also increase fabric efficiency, so better insulation. And also, ideally, I think that in the consultation, there were like a couple of options preferred by the government. One was just like more similar to what we have, but with a better fabric improvement, etc. Another one also included some PV photovoltaic panels and also better airtightness. So here we can see in this table the indicative specification for future home standard, and we say indicative because just remember that this building regulation is still not implemented. It's going to be implemented in 2025. So we are trying to be ahead of the game in this case. And this is the current building regulations. So this sits under a number of projects that we are doing in our center on improving air quality and reducing overheating. So we have a number of PhD students working on new build houses with home developers such as Taylor Wimpey, Redrow, and Barrett Homes. This one that I'm presenting at the moment, and this project, this pilot project, complements this Project 80, developed by Midland Heart, which is a housing association, and they were the ones who decided they have a development with normal houses and the current building standards, and they came to us because we are good friends with them and said, well, what if we turn this into a pilot for future home standard, and you are our academic partner and we do all the post-occupancy evaluation, etc., etc. And we said, yeah, why not? This seems like an excellent opportunity. And then other projects more about occupant engagement, because we feel that bringing occupants on board is very, very critical. So this is about a belief that we have in our team that with houses being more and more focused on energy conservation, so improving the fabric, making houses very airtight, in the end, air quality becomes really, really critical if we don't ventilate right these houses. And then we can end up with problems of poor air quality or overheating, what we name as unintended consequences. So in our team, we try to do like a real world research, so quite applied, like collaborating with industry, with housing developers, and to monitor real houses with real occupants and see what's going on. So this project is in the Enhanced in Birmingham. It's in the north, near Perry Bar, when they had all the Commonwealth Games and the stadium, etc. So very close to that. We have this development with 12 homes, 4-bed, 2-bed, and 3-bed houses. And as I said, it started like a normal project, a normal development, this traditional construction, which was also an interesting challenge, because when you talk about low carbon building and future homes, sometimes you think about lightweight construction or off-site construction, etc. But this was like how we can achieve this with social housing and normal traditional construction. And so those are the houses finished. It was also an interesting journey, because I have to say that we took some civil servants from the Department of Leveling Up to the site. And according to them, that was at the time, the development most advanced in the country for future home standard. There are a number of developments or testing beds or like houses around, but not like this one where real people are going to occupy these houses. So we managed to partner with a number of people in industry, from Extra Firm providing the insulation, Baxi, Valiant, and a number of other industry partners. So these are what we did here as well, is to say, okay, we are going to do this trying to achieve 80% reduction, but let's try different types of solutions. So some of them have a normal air tightness level 5, and some of them where the target was 1.5, so more airtight. In those ones, we included mechanical ventilation. So MVHR, mechanical ventilation with heat recovery. In all of them, air source heat pumps, because according to future home standard, there are no gas boilers. So we have to do everything electric, which was one of the problems why the plan was to hand the houses over in March, and they were in the end handed over at the end of May. A part of the problem was because of the electricity connection, so the services, and that was quite a challenge. We included PV, photovoltaic, and we were also trying different types of concrete blocks. So we mixed and picked and choose. But the idea of this pilot research is not just about monitoring those houses that are going to be like much more like 80% reduction, CO2 reduction. It's also about comparing against current building regulations. So the good thing is that Midland Heart was also developing a site in Burton-on-Trent with the same contractor, the same type of construction, the same sort of typologies. So it was ideal for monitoring, saying we can compare like by like. So it was like a blessing to get suddenly that development also being more or less finished at the same time. And here a bit the differences in under current building regulations. The main difference would be that the cavity is the ones in Burton-on-Trent 125 millimeters with the mineral wool, whereas in the ones in Birmingham we have 150 cavity filled with PIR with solid panels. And then we also, in the roof, we have extra insulation, other things to pick about the air tightness in under current building regs level 5, and in Birmingham we are targeting some houses 1.5 and others natural ventilated a level of 5. Heating, current regulations, gas, and the future home standard air source heat pump, and also electric panel heating. MVHR in the ones that are more airtight, and in the ones that are not so, that are like normal, like level 5. just natural ventilation with coupled with mechanical extra ventilation. We also included some wastewater heat recovery and also the windows. Now the windows are normally around 1.4, 1.6. This is an interesting story to tell. I don't think I have time to tell about the story about the windows, but later on, if someone wants to know why, because it's supposed to go, Future Home Standard is targeting 0.8. You only can get 0.8 with triple glaze, not with double glaze. But it was very difficult to get double glaze. So I can, later in the break, I can tell more about that story because it's quite fascinating. And then we have the monitoring, and we used Aura sensors, and also on-room sensors, and then get all the information in the cloud. And we monitor the houses unoccupied, so there is a kind of period of the houses unoccupied, also to see the differences. And then this is in Birmingham. We start Future Home Standard. We started the 30th of May. The idea is to monitor until the 30th of September. So very soon we'll finish the monitoring period. And this one in Burton-on-Trent, we started the monitoring of the unoccupied in February. And then in May, we also started the monitoring of the houses occupied. And again, we'll finish on the 30th of September. And I'm about to finish, just a couple of slides and I finish. But as I have said, until the 30th of September, we are not finishing the monitoring. But as I was invited here today, and I was quite pleased to be invited here today, I said, well, at least let's try to get a couple of slides of interim results of what are we seeing at the moment. And these are both houses in Birmingham, like similar 3 or 4 bedroom houses. This one has mechanical ventilation and that one has natural ventilation. And we can see that the PM 2.5, the air quality seems better in the house with mechanical ventilation. But having said that, then we have also this case where this house is in Birmingham with mechanical ventilation. This house is in Burton-on-Trent under current building regulations, naturally ventilated, and the air quality is better in the natural ventilated one. Why is that? I mean, anecdotally, we know that in this house in Birmingham, they are all day at home and they cook quite a lot all the time. So then we have the idea of the discussion about lifestyles. And the good thing is that we are conducting also interviews to the occupants. So it's going to be quite interesting to compare results against what we are getting from the interviews, because we feel that lifestyle is going to make a huge difference in the data that we are monitoring. And that's all. Thank you very much.
We do have a little bit of gear for the next talk, so we'll have time for one question. Anyone have a question? Oh, yeah.
I just actually had a question about that last point, when mechanical ventilation was worse air quality. And I'm just actually curious whether, in general, with mechanical ventilation, because, you know, part of it would depend on how clean or how well maintained the systems are. Do you know whether, in general, not necessarily in this case, but do we know how much that does affect air quality if systems aren't really kind of cleaned regularly and such?
Well, these houses were handed over at the end of May, so it was quite recent
in general. In terms of like cleanliness of your.
But these houses are the housing association is maintaining them, so you would imagine that there is a regular maintenance protocol there. A good question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next speaker. So our next speaker is Hong Yang, who couldn't be here today, but he sent through a video. And so now I just need to get it up. Okay. So here's our next speaker, Hong Yang, who will have his email at the end of the slide, so he's not able to take questions. So if you have any burning questions, keep an eye out for his email and do get in touch with him. Here we go.
Hello everyone, it's my great pleasure to report our small project, ventilation, air quality, and people health in care home. My name is Hong Yang. I'm from the.
That's too quiet, isn't it? On this bit. On there.
Hello everyone, it's my great pleasure to report our small project, ventilation, air quality, and people health in care home. My name is Hong Yang. I'm from the University of Radon. First of all, I and myself and my team thank you for the generous support from Brisbane City Future Urban Ventilation Network support to our project. So my short presentation will include 4 parts. First, I will introduce the general background about the older people, health, ventilation, and air quality. Second part, I'll report our main research methods and report our preliminary result and with some conclusion. So firstly, I think many people realize our population is aging. So you can see some number here. By 1950s, the older population is around 5%. It's around 128 million. By 2020, this number come to around 9.35%. Population by around more than 700 million. The prediction chosen by the 2100, the percentage will be 22.54%, and the population can be 2.5 billion. So you can see it's a very big population. It will be a very big challenge to the society. So in the United Kingdom, there are approximately 0.4 million people live in a care home. So this number will still increase in the next couple of years and decades. So in care home, different from many locations, the air quality is rarely measured. So air quality, we don't have a measurement, so it's very hard to know the air quality in care homes. During the COVID period, there's some policy we're trying to increase ventilation and reduce the infection chance. However, there's some different interest. For example, respiration illness can be worse due to the drop in the temperature and the humidity. Overall, this can be feel discomfort during the cold weather. On the other hand, if there are less ventilation, the indoor air pollutant can build up. They can further worsen the illness and also can increase carbon dioxide. So there are some preliminary studies, for example, at 2019 early indicated situations. So what should we do? Ventilation, air quality, and human health. So that's the research topic of this project. So the main objective, we're trying to measure and understand air quality in care homes. We choose 3 care homes in Radon. And also we're trying to understand people's opinion about the influence of ventilation on air quality and Radon's health. By this, we mainly use questionnaire. So the main methods for the air quality measurement, we use a portable sensor, the Bluetooth air quality sensor. To measure the ventilation, we may need to measure the carbon dioxide level indoor and calculate indoor-outdoor ratio, get the ventilation rate with the sensor Wave Plus. To understand people's opinion about the impact ventilation, we use survey. In the meantime, we're also trying to understand if there's some influence of people's health condition can impact their opinion. So also survey the people's health condition in last 3 years. As I mentioned, this work mainly studied in 3 care homes in Radon. So you can see the first one close to university is called Lakeside Care Home. Second one near the city center called Pembroke Care Home. The third one is Northcote. So work in these 3 care homes. There's some preliminary result because this project is still going on. So we hope to collect more data, and in next time we can report more exciting result. But currently we can show some air quality in these 3 care homes in Radon. So you can see the blue bar is particulate 10 and orange bar is PM2.5. This result measured in March, April this year, so nearly in the early spring. So you can see the result. I think it's not bad because it's generally below the World Health Organization guideline values. For example, the PM10 in Northcote only 5 microgram per kilometer. And also, as I mentioned, we're trying to understand people's opinion about ventilation and air quality. So we use survey. So here you can see some general background of the surveyed older people. 60% are female and 40% are male. So roughly balance, but not a balance. The age, you can see half they are in age 70 to 80, and 15% was 80 years old, 35 less than 70. Because also trying to understand, do they very active for the outdoor exercise? So here we ask, how long do you spend outside every day? So you can see here, nearly 65%, they see they have 30 to 1 hour, but there are 35 they have longer, even though more than 1 hour longer time outside. We also ask, do you participate in any physical activity every day? So you can see here, 70% say yes. So this number shows this surveyed out people, they are still very kind of active for the physical activities and outdoor exercise. They're now also trying to understand their health condition. Do they have any kind of disease in the last 3 years? So here we ask, do they have some stroke in the last 3 years? You can see here, 15% mentioned they have. And we ask, do they have heart disease in the last 3 years? 30% said yes. And around 25% have lung disease in the last 3 years, and 30% have a respiratory disease in the last 3 years. So you can see around 15% to 30% have various diseases in the last 3 years. This is probably the most important and the most interesting result we found so far. So you can see here, we ask the people, the surveyed older people, do you agree the building mechanical ventilation system can improve air quality in your room? So you can see here, around 35% agree and 10% don't agree. So in total, you can see 45% people agree or strongly agree building a mechanical ventilation system can improve indoor air quality in their room. However, we should also notice there are 5% disagree and half, you keep it neutral. So don't have gray or discrete. So I would say this is probably the most interesting result so far by our project, because we also ask people's health condition. So we're trying to understand if the people with such disease in the last 3 years have a strong opinion on the ventilation. So we do some chi-square test. However, our results show there is no significant relationship between people opinion on ventilation and air quality with their health condition in the last 3 years. As I said, because our project is still running, we hope to get more data, so probably the result will be changed in the future. So now we can come to a very brief preliminary conclusion. So based on our measurement in the 3 care homes in March, April this year, in general, you can see the particulate matters in the care home are very high. They are below the World Health Organization guideline values. According to our survey result, around 45% surveyed older people, they are agreed or strongly agreed that mechanical ventilation can improve indoor air quality in their home. However, bear in mind, 50% surveyed older people keep neutral, and 5 they disagree. And we also mentioned the health conditions. There are 15% to 30% surveyed older people, they had a stroke, heart disease, lung disease, or chronic respiratory disease in the last 3 years. However, based on our chi-square test, there is no significant difference or significant relationship between their health condition and their opinions. So this is our preliminary conclusion. These 2 references we mentioned in the report. And thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, please email me. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. So we've got our last mini project now to come up. Johnny Hyam's going to come and give a presentation. Yeah, I'll have things to go.
Right, okay, thank you. So I'm not usually the full amount. So yeah, so it's a long title, and I always put these long titles on proposals for things, and I always think afterwards it always takes up too much space on the slide. So yeah, I'm Johnny Hyam, University of Liverpool, and I'm in the School of Environmental Sciences in the Department of Geography and Planning. So there's a disclaimer here, not a geographer. I'd love to tell the students that I'm actually an engineer, then worked in chemical engineering for DOE for a few years. So I'm going to start with this, and I'm sure everybody knew today it was Happy Car Free Day. Did everyone know that? Okay. Dissemination is so important, isn't it? And that's something that we've been fighting in Liverpool, or fighting across how we actually disseminate some more findings. So we're feeling the format is going to completely off the rest of this presentation. So let's start with some motivation. So I've been in Liverpool 4 years now. Scary how quick that's gone. There's actually some work where I started years ago, and it started in fluid mechanics about forcing flows. How can we force a flow in a multi-scale way and maybe change what happens to this flow? And what we did is experiments in a water flume, paper in Physics of Fluid last year, and we're showing that basically we change these multi-scales round, we change the way in which things are forced, and we change how the turbulent flow or the turbulence acts afterwards. This looks a bit like a city. And this has got me kind of into this field, moving to Liverpool and working on this. And this is the team I've been working with. So I've been there 4 years and we've built this team around me. So I always like to mention these people because actually these are doing all the work, it seems, at the moment. So I've got Cami, Chloe, Andy, Josie, Shamari, and Ian, which I'm going to be talking about a lot of their work. Ian's from Alder Hay, Cami and Chloe, PhD students. Andy and Andy are 2 guys I work with quite closely. And Josie and Shamari have just finished their MSCs. And I'll be showing some of their data in this. So I'm going to present is the ideas, what we've got, but first I'm going to give you a bit of a sales pitch of what we're doing in Liverpool, because Liverpool's not really the capital for air quality at the moment, but I'm trying to make sure it is. So what we've got, 2 PhDs, third one coming soon, a postdoc. We've got 5 internships that changed this morning, also all funded through this PCIH, which has been cut off the H, but loads of grants. We've got this air quality network, which I'll show you, Clean Air Club, which is something initiative we've set up for the students, and the Clean Air Mobile, which I've been building the last few weeks. So we've also been working with Alder Hey, with Ian, to set up this Clean Air Clinic, which is all about monitoring children, how we can actually correlate between respiratory health and through air quality. And we've also got this MSc module, which I'm always pushing. The students build an air quality sound sensor. I've got the circuits designs if anyone wants to mug with them as well. So what we're aiming in this study was we were going to install some sensors outside some children's homes who are being treated at Alder Hey Children's Hospital with respiratory health. We were going to give each of these children a mobile sensor, and we were going to track them. And then we were going to create some connections between respiratory health and sensor data. Caveat here, parents don't like it if you track the children. So they don't like it. So we've not done that objective. Second bit, so we've got top and the bottom here. So, okay, right, a bit more context here. This is Liverpool. And if you've not been before, I've got this river down the middle, this is River Mersey. And it's a bit of a strange city that it's really poor. So this is the index of multiple deprivation. So this is showing pretty much everything's in red. A bit controversial, being I'm wearing a blue t-shirt here as well. But everything's in red, and that shows it's the most deprived decile according to 2019. Actually, my MSc students who were doing the module, our air quality module, it became the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, and maybe sixth. They didn't know they were all arguing most deprived city in the country. So it's pretty bad. What we can also do is we can actually overlay some other data. And this is morbidity, I'll be careful how I say this, from asthma admissions. So these are children's homes, and they are being admitted into hospital with sudden asthma attacks. And let's pull that back and forth. And you can see there's a bit of a correlation there. If you're poor, you're more likely that your child's going to have asthma. And they've actually made these correlations quite strong in Alder Hey. These are some older maps. COVID kind of messed this up because people stayed at home a little bit, but they're starting to see the same things again. So back to this picture. Why am I talking about this? Well, I worked in PIV previously. I'm aiming to do the same thing in the city, and we've actually got quite close. Actually, I've got a smartphone app, which is a bit of a sales plug here. If anyone's bothered about doing PIV on the phone, it launches on the 4th of October. So when you do PIV, which is particulate velocimetry, you track little particles in the air or in water. These are particles in the air. This is particulate matter. This is our standard textbook picture, right? These float in the air. We can track these, but we have to track them a little bit differently. So maybe we're thinking a little bit outside the box. We track them with particulate matter sensors. So this is a startup business based in Liverpool, which we've put sensors around the city. So effectively, we've almost got like this PIV picture of the whole city. Okay, if you might argue maybe our lowish cost, they're OPCs. That's all the details there. Networks aren't that easy. These were meant to be installed in 2019 at the beginning of Cammy's PhD. Actually, well, it's 2022 and we've just finished installing them all. So what have we got? We've got this across the city. We've got 50. And you can see they're all triangulated quite well. We've put a bit of thought into how we put these in. And if we link back, look at our index of multiple deprivation, we've tried to hit these areas so we can begin to make some correlations. That's the one at Mersey Rail training station. We're not going to remember which one it is. So, as I promised, we were going to look outside some children's homes. We've chosen Bootle, which is really deprived. Actually, you can really smell the acrid smell of the tar factory up there. And down here, around Toxteth area, where there's another house here, which is kind of in a lesser deprived area. We were going to put them outside the school, outside the schools. We've done it outside the schools. However, it's been the summer holidays, so we're just going to bring some results of what's happened outside the homes. So first of all, there's some pictures of Liverpool, by the way. That's the view from our office. So first of all, what we can do is, now we've got these, is we can get on with this PIV view of what the city looks like. So now we can see particulates. Oops. Moving. So we can actually begin to track them. So now we've got this insight across the city. So you might see that the Met Office is telling us it's 2.5 metre, well, it's high, PM 2.5 today. But actually you can see it's quite reactive. And we can start to pick out different features in different days. We can see, actually at the end, we see as the students are starting to come back, And actually some preliminary work, we found that Manchester City were the dirtiest of football clubs coming to visit the Anfield, because we've actually got one in Anfield stadiums. Yeah, it's in a really good position on Anfield Stadium. We might have to go and check it one match day, I think. So we can average these, as you would do in standard PIV, and you can actually find some features. So that picture I posted where it's really red there, that's in a rich area, but that's in the Strand. And we've actually been changing an 8-lane system down to a 3-lane system, which hasn't proved very popular in Liverpool. But what we can see here is we've got these patterns which are emerging. 28 days patterns, PM 2.5, high concentrations. We bring back these pictures. Okay, these are two completely different maps. I'm not very good at the GIS thing that they use. So geographers have got lots of terms for things, but these seem to correlate really well. PM 2.5, PM 10. So what we can see here is when we have these high regions of PM 2.5 afterwards, we've got high asthma attacks. So that's quite interesting. So what we found here is basically, if we look at the time series of A and B, if we've got high levels of pollution, it creates the higher chances of asthma. That makes perfect sense, right? So that's that solved. Well, kind of, but it gets us back to this again. And this is something we've been thinking about and working on for the past few months. So we always talk about particulate matter looking like this. Actually, when I give this to the Pint of Science, which is my usual talk, I've got a big ball like this, an exercise ball, which is my hair, and I've got a tennis ball, which is representing my PM 2.5. I can show all these different sizes. But really, we've heard this morning, is that right? I don't think it is, because these particulates aren't round balls. And actually, we think of them as different sizes, and we try and characterize them as different things. Maybe that's not right. So this is where Chloe's been working with a PhD. And we've been collecting some samples. So now in these two areas, A and B, butyl, down at the toxin area, we've been collecting some different samples, and we've been sticking them in this scanning electron microscope. What it means is we can actually take a view at some of these particulates. So this is a PM10 particle there or thereabouts. Not very circular, is it? It's quite jagged, as we've seen before. Okay. This is a PM 2.5-ish particle. I must point out these little bits around it are actually silver. That's how we have to capture the thing, but put it on the SEM. As you can see, they've got like these little nodules on top of it. So Chloe, who's doing this for a PhD, very clever person, a chemist, is now starting to chemically analyze some of these things. And you can do that to a certain extent with the scanning electron microscope, but not perfectly. And that's where the next level is working out what techniques we can now use to start to elucidate what some of these things are. Likewise, we can see some of these smaller, finer particles. These are PM1 particles. And actually, if you do a Google Scholar search, I'll go later, look at PM10, you'll get billions of hits. PM 2.5, maybe trillions of hits. But PM1, no one's really talking about this as much, but it's still there. As we've heard this morning, it's probably quite important. So that's something we want to start looking at as well. So to bring it back a little bit to what we found from our sample locations, so this is some of Shamari and Josie's work, which they've been doing as part of their MSc projects, is they've been out and they've been collecting these different samples. And what we found is actually our theory is quite correct, but we know that if we live in a different area, that we've actually got different levels of air quality, high poor air quality, you're more likely to have asthma, right? But actually inside of these, we have different chemical compositions. And these chemical compositions sit across these bounds. And this maybe is starting a question. Why do we call them PM1? Why do we call them PM2.5? Why do we call them PM10? And actually, where do we get those numbers from of those, what the WHO is coming up with? Well, actually, if you start to look back in the literature, PM10 comes from the 1960s from Germany. That's when we started classifying things that way. And that's before we had some of these more high-tech methods of looking at these particulates. So what I'll leave these conclusions there is we know that Liverpool doesn't meet WHO guidelines. I don't think many cities will in the country. There's not that much we can do. We found that clearly there's a link between asthma and morbidity and the levels of particulate matter. And we've got some really neat stuff coming with that. And We've also found there's this link with asthma, morbidity and deprivation as well. So the poorer you are, the more likely you're going to hit this. I think I've said the same thing. However, that's quite hard to quantify, especially in a city like Liverpool, because you have a lot of rich, poor areas. It's an old, very old town, which is built up almost in a fractal way. But most of all, what we can conclude is, are we looking at particulate matter wrong? I think we are. Why is PM1, PM2.5, PM10 so special? Maybe we should be looking at the chemical compositions of them as well as the sizes, because in reality, as we found, maybe a certain element is going to really affect us more, and we might be looking for something. We might have ridiculously high levels of PM10, but it might not be as bad as something we're looking at PM1. So that's some work that we're trying on. So we're trying to work out at the moment. So in a nutshell, that's what we're doing. I've skipped over an awful lot there, so there's going to be lots of questions, I'm sure. So I'll leave you. This is our picture from our, if you ever come to the Roxby building in Liverpool, happy to come. It's actually a building site at the moment, so it's full of PM2.5. So you can see out the whole of Liverpool from the window. Great view. There's a Strand, there's the Liver buildings and Radio Tower, and you can, 2 cathedrals are just either side of there as well. So I'll leave you with that. That's the hat that we've got for our dissemination. I've got the hat in the bag, it is real as well. So yeah, has anyone got any questions?
Time for questions. Or lots of questions.
Yeah.
If we don't have time for
Sure,
them.
okay.
You're up first.
Great presentation. I had two questions. Firstly, how are you collecting the particles? Are they suspended or are they line particles? Because that, I think, has quite a big difference.
Very true.
And how you
so this is my big fight at the moment, and the European Union is who dictates 584/2014 is the law which dictates how particulate matter. It's not the law; it's the guidelines how it's measured. I'm not sure that's correct. We're using something called OPCs, which are optical particulate counters. They're all right. We can calibrate them against things. We're starting to begin weighing it, but weighing it's really quite difficult, and especially when we're kind of in the growth stage at the moment, we've not really got that facility. So I agree. Yeah, it's not perfect.
I'm more interested in how you're collecting the samples for.
Oh, sorry.
And chemicals.
Yeah, so we've got impactors. So two-layered impactor. We've got one for PM2.5, one for PM10. Basically, you have a pump and it sucks it through. The Reynolds number set such that it sucks it through and it collects it at different layers. They're on silver membranes. We then stick them in the SEM, and Chloe does the stuff. And to be honest, that's about as far as I know. And she comes back with some brilliant results. So
the second part of my question is: you've done some amazing work on looking at the spatial variation of these of the chemistry of these. Are you going to look at the temporal variation of them?
Yeah.
I think there might be some.
So yeah, we're currently 3D printing some more impactors because they cost about £1,000 each. So we're currently 3D printing them, and we're going to make mass amounts of them that we can stick around the city. But yeah, the only problem is it takes about 48 hours to get a full sample in one of the impactors to get something which is usable then on the SEM. So it's a bit like all measuring of air quality. It's not perfect, but it gives us a good idea anyway.
Okay, so there were. Go on, the back.
I think one.
Yep.
My point is that whether this link the relation between the alpha and the PM concentration.
Yeah.
Is only the info of the genomics. My point is if anyone can do this before, because you cannot show the chemical what changed inside of the PM, you would be so you can have something. Yeah.
Yeah.
My question is that any different point.
Next step, yes. So that is actually a plot, and I was amazed how they correlate. So that's something that Ian gave me. So Ian Cena, who's the professor there from Alderhay, he gave me that nearly 2 years ago, and that data's from the last couple of weeks. And when you put them on top of each other, it was just like, wow, that's a correlation spot on there. That's something we want to do. But as I say, COVID's kind of messed these things up because we lose the correlation. Because a lot of people stayed at home, which is probably a good thing and also a bad thing. And we've got the maps of during COVID that the disparity completely changed, but. It's on the line. Hopefully, one of these nice funding bodies will give us lots of money to research it, but they don't seem to like it at the moment. So we'll see.
You might be limited by the time required for taking samples, but I wonder if you've looked at whether there's an association between blank exposure and emissions for those samples. the higher concentrations, but when you just that way
Something we can look at. To be honest, I would expect so. NHSE are really funding this stuff. They're pushing it from what I understand at the moment. So we're pushing this clean air clinic with Alder Hayes. So hopefully we can start to get that. That sounds really bad. I always say this, talking about children being ill here, but we should get some funding to help them look into this and see if we can do something about it.
I see one comment from the chat, more comment.
Yeah.
But there's said that there's a birth cohort study in Liverpool that you can actually
Okay.
see, but I'll send you.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, yeah, thank you. Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you, Rosie.
Okay,
Okay, thank you. No problem.